the best companies were formed, I believe, in downturns. A lot of businesses can succeed during boom times, but there's not a lot of people who are able to take a phone that's not ringing at all, dial for dollars, and convince someone definitively to take an action that's profitable for your business, right? Those are the truly gifted salespeople.
This is the Pass the Pitch podcast with Anna Frazzetto. Each episode, we sit down with bold thinkers and industry trailblazers to uncover the strategies, stories, and sparks of inspiration that drive growth and transformation. Let's get started.
Well, hello. Here we are today again, and I get to talk to Vinda Souza, who's the Chief Marketing Officer for Ref Assured. Vinda, I always like doing a little bit of research, and I was taking a look at your LinkedIn, and you describe yourself as a communications and content marketing leader for high growth, agile technology companies who value customer experience as paramount. You also thrive on being a player coach in high-performing, nurturing teams and prioritizing both speed and quality simultaneously. So I have to say, when I first met Vinda, I thought she was so technical that I actually forgot that she was the head of marketing. Seriously, and for those of you who don't know Ref Assured, I would highly encourage you to go out and find out more about Ref Assured, because they are truly revolutionizing the whole referencing process for candidates and actually aid in company growth. So I love the fast pace and the lively discussions we always have, and not to mention all the fun that we get to have at the conferences. So welcome, Vinda.
Thank you, Anna. I'm so happy to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Excellent. So why don't we just jump right in? I always like talking a little bit about, leadership impact, and I find it fascinating to talk to different leaders around the world and actually to ask the question about what's the best business decision you almost didn't make and what pushed you over the edge?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. And I'm actually going to turn it on its head a little bit, if you don't mind, because I don't have an example of a great business decision I almost didn't make. All the best business decisions that I have made in my life have been ones that I proactively set my sights on and pursued with a singular purpose. Sometimes it's taken months, sometimes it's taken years to bring it to fruition, but I'm just like, I need to do this, and I know I need to do it, and I need to do whatever is necessary to remove the obstacles in my path to being able to get there. But what's interesting is that I've actually had several, or maybe more than several, bad business decisions that I've made because I ignored red flags and I didn't listen to my gut, or I just went along with something because I felt cornered by a sub cost fallacy, for instance. So I think that's a good life lesson to never ignore what your gut is telling you to do, because it's either going to lead you down the right path, one that feels comfortable to you and self-fulfilling, or it's going to make you take shortcuts that ultimately will do you a disservice and likely your career as well. I've certainly pursued jobs, for instance, that it felt like the thing to do. It just sort of felt like the next rung on the ladder or a box I needed to check, or something about it was appealing in a low impact way. I just felt like, oh, this is expected of me. I need to do this. And then every time I try to walk down that lane, it's ended up poorly for me. Versus, what do I actually want? What's really important to me? What will make me feel satisfied and self-fulfilled? And then those things tended to be much better for not just my own outcomes, but those around me, my family, everything.
So, Vinda, I just want to kind of peel away some of the layers of what you said, because I think it's incredible. First of all, the fact of being so determined and going after what you want and removing the obstacles, that's often, and I'm sure you're involved in lots of conversations, often something that people struggle with in having the confidence to say, well, no, I am literally manifesting this and I'm going to get this and I'm going to figure out how to get from point A to point B. So how do you find that uh, intestinal fortitude, right? That courage to, I'm going to go for it.
Well, I think that this probably comes back to, honestly, childhood lessons in a way, which is probably a fairly unsatisfying answer. But most of what I've done in my life to set myself up for success has been a little bit thankless and not glamorous. And there really hasn't been a eureka moment. It's always been slow and steady, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, because sometimes you're on the top of the leaderboard and sometimes you're not even in the room, right? And I think what's been important is that sense of humility, and that you really don't have any second chances. I mean, and my dad always taught me there are no second chances in life. And I know that sounds like a brutal lesson, that he didn't mean it unkindly at all. And we always have a safety net. We always have the love of our friends and family. Like, there's always some sort of protective mechanism at the end of the day, but that we shouldn't necessarily go into something feeling like it's okay if we screw it up. I kind of pursue things where there is a sense of seriousness to the decisions I'm making, and I know that they impact more than just myself, and that I really don't want to be willy-nilly about it. And yes, you'll fail, and yes, things will go wrong often, but you should put your best effort into what you're doing and try to be thoughtful about it, because you need to respect other people's time and the investments they're making in you. So the root of all of these lessons, I would say, is a sense of humility and desire to do right by others and to maintain the dignity of other people, which means that you're not operating under the mantra of move fast and break things, which I've always found was the most distasteful of all mantras, right? That you're operating and trying to deliver quality in everything that you do and to be respectful of the people around you.
Vinda, I have to say, I think your father sounds like my father. Very similar lesson in the sense of failure was not an option, right? You had to approach it that you were going to succeed, whatever task was in front of you. Now, if something happened and went wrong, things always go wrong. That was different. But to approach it with an attitude that you were going to be successful, and it was respectful for those, like you said, around you that kind of helped in getting you there, or kind of guiding the path or leading the way. So great message. I love that, Vinda. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's talk a little bit about what's one underrated skill or trait that more people in sales or leadership, because I think it could apply to both, should master.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind most vociferously is empathy. It's an underrated skill, not just in sales or marketing, but in every aspect of life. That ability to understand and appreciate what somebody else is going through and want to affect positive change. And this idea of educating yourself, right? Reading a lot, learning about somebody else's experiences, trying to see their side of an issue, trying to anticipate how they might feel about something. I mean, in my marketing career, the most successful campaigns have always been born out of anticipating how an audience will react to a message, to an advertisement, to a brand campaign, to a tagline, whatever it may be, to a new product, to a change in how we deliver our services, whatever that may be. It's around educating yourself so that you can understand and anticipate how somebody may react to a situation, and then adjust accordingly to tailor your approach. And that is probably the cornerstone of good sales technique. It's saying, like, all right, when I say this, what is this person I'm talking to likely to be thinking? How are they going to receive this information? And what are they going to think about me or whatever I am promoting or delivering as a result. And empathy is kind of gone by the wayside, I feel like, in a lot of interactions because it's just sort of pushing one's opinion on someone else, which is a pretty short-sighted approach. I would imagine that this idea, I genuinely want to create a connection with you. I want to see things from your lens. I want to provide something that you will consider to be valuable. And I want you to have a warm place in your heart for me as a result of what I've done and the engagement that we have had together. That's valuable across the board. It's what I teach my kids. It's, what I try to espouse growing up, traveling the world, meeting a lot of different people. And it's what I think makes for the best business decisions, to not just go out there with a line in the sand that you're drawing and be like, this is right, this is wrong. But to really just be like, all right, well, let's collect evidence. Let's make a thoughtful decision. Let's educate ourselves. Let's seek the truth.
Right. And Vinda, I mean, the reality is empathy comes with such a level of understanding, right? The time that you're taking to really understand the people around you, the situation, what the real problem is, understand your client. And you're right, that is a skill that's often forgotten. And I would say in leadership, culture is based on how your leaders act in certain situations. And if they're not leading with empathy, that definitely affects the culture of an organization.
Absolutely. You can tell when someone has your best interest at heart, right? Versus when they're just trying to push you into a realm of being an order taker. And the best corporate cultures have that empathy at the top and it flows down.
Exactly. Okay, so now how do you keep your team motivated when results aren't coming as fast as expected? And I think this has been an issue that people have been experiencing, oh my goodness, for the last couple of years. It's not something new.
That's tough because there's no one size fits all approach here. I would say the first question I'd ask is, why aren't the results happening? Why aren't they coming in fast? And diagnose and address the real problem, because results not coming in quickly can be due to a number of factors. Maybe the team's doing everything right, but the market is really soft, or there's unpredictable forces at play. Or maybe you've done a lot of investments in building long-term value creation in your programs, and it just takes months or a couple of years to realize that return on investment. And you've done all the right things, and now the rest is left up to possibility. Another chance could be you're not doing the right things, and maybe the team's not working hard enough, or they're not working smart enough, or they're not well aligned, or they're doing sort of competitive strategies that are counterproductive when taken in totality. And then assessing what the actual issue is will let you deliver against the right solution. So say, for instance, you're just in wait and see mode. Well, then it's a matter of motivating your team to not lose hope and to keep the faith and to keep doing what they're doing and to keep investing in the right programs and doubling down so that when there is a rebound or when there's an upturn, you're ready. You're ready to pounce, right? Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So if it's just a matter of putting a foundation down for preparation, then you can capitalize on the opportunity as soon as it shows itself, and then boom, you're off to the races. If it's a matter of the team not being well prepared or not operating in a well-aligned fashion, then you have a team building challenge. And you need to be able to understand each person's motivations and strengths and capitalize on their strengths and point them in the direction of their individual superpowers, because I do firmly believe that everybody has something that they're really, really good at, and that the ideal type of career path means identifying those and moving people closer to those, as opposed to trying to force them to be good at things they're not great at. There's one thing to move somebody out of their comfort zone and to encourage them to learn new things and to be bold and how they pursue solutions, but it's another thing entirely to ignore some of these strengths and have them try to become strong at things that they're weak at. Like that's usually a bad use of time and very demoralizing for the person who has to take that type of action. So once you understand what's really driving the lack of results, you'll be able to address those things. But a lack of perceived results is a red herring because it can be very misleading what the genesis of that actually is.
And that's true. I mean, you have to get to the root cause. But I also like to tie, I mean, your answer fits so nicely and flows so nicely from the last question that we were just talking about, because you need to have a level of empathy, right? To understand what's going on with your team, that level of understanding, and then being able to act on, based on the information that you gather. It's not that the answer is not that it's just a really bad market right now for, tech staffing, for example.
Sure.
It goes deeper than that.
That's right. And I mean, also the best teams are the ones that are proactive and prepared. So I don't like to throw my hands up and be like, oh, it's a tough market. We're just going to sit around and eat ice cream. Like, that's not a thing. So, okay, great. Yeah, it's a tough market. What can we do to be competitively differentiated? What can we tell our clients? How can we get ahead of the game? How can we be ready for a rebound? How can we start to create a healthy, strong foundation so that we can scale quicker and operate faster and more effectively as soon as there's some sort of a tailwind, or even in the absence of tailwinds? How do we create that strength? The best companies are formed, I believe, in downturns. Because if you are able to demonstrate product market fit and have operational health and strong internal alignment, and you're able to deliver value and acquire customers when things are really tough, you've probably got a business that's got real legs behind it. A lot of businesses can succeed during boom times. It's just like the same thing we saw with a lot of recruiting teams right now when they were hiring salespeople during the best possible economic environment. And then the phone's ringing off the hook. And there are a lot of people who could just answer a phone that's ringing and collect money. But there's not a lot of people who are able to take a phone that's not ringing at all, dial for dollars, and convince someone definitively to take an action that's profitable for your business, right? Those are the truly gifted salespeople. That's a sales talent you want on your team. You don't want someone to just man the phone lines like that. Anybody can do that.
Right, right. Well, and you know what? Actually, you're making me think of another question to ask you, which I think kind of flows nicely from what we were just talking about. What's one mindset shift that unlocked new growth for you or your team?
So I think probably the one of the most valuable lessons I learned as a leader when I started managing teams was that never confuse being busy for being productive because they are not the same thing. And there's actually a certain type of mindset out there where, and it's quite common in tech, right? Especially venture-backed tech, where one tends to pull from a lot of high achieving pools of talent. We're just talking about how much you're doing. We're talking about how busy you are, can be confused with delivering real strategic value. And you don't want to get those two things confused. The irony is that some of the calmest people I know are the ones who are really moving the needle. And ultimately, freaking out about something doesn't change the outcome at all, right? Being in panic mode is the hallmark of unpreparedness. It makes a mild situation moderate. It makes a moderate situation severe. And it doesn't actually solve anything. It just puts other people on defense and on the back foot. So one of the things I started to realize in a role where I was running a larger team was that the folks who were very loud and nervous and focusing a lot on paper pushing were having a negative impact on the rest of the team. And ultimately, in order for the team to succeed, we needed to make sure that those folks had a very dignified and graceful path out of the business. And then I started to hire for unpretentious confidence, which was the single most important value in any teams that I had ever built. And the reason behind strong alignment in those teams, people who knew what good looked like, they had been in quote unquote good before. They understood what the playbook was, and they were able to thoughtfully execute on it without a lot of fanfare, without needing constant credit, and to do so in a really laid back and collegial fashion. So we were all rowing in the same direction. We were celebrating each other's successes. There was a easy camaraderie and a genuine goodwill and good-naturedness around how the team interacted with each other. And there didn't need to be this constant friction. I know that there's a lot of business books that will say, oh, well, friction makes for the best decisions. I think diversity makes for the best decisions. I don't think friction does. I think diversity of perspective and opinion and skill sets makes for great decisions. Friction kind of just makes for chaos, and it's unpleasant. So yes, friction between people or, frenetic energy can be great for creative output in certain select cases, but over the long term, I think it's just kind of destructive. And I would like to hire for people whose aptitude, skill sets, and desire complements each other without necessarily being antagonistic to individual outcomes.
Oh, that's a great point, Vinda. I couldn't agree with you more as far as, friction versus diversity of thought. I mean, there's studies out there that show high performing teams have diversity of thought. If everybody has the same perspective, you're not challenging the organization either from a growth perspective or from a product development perspective. You need to have that diversity of thought. But you're right, friction causes no good whatsoever. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
All right. So tell me about a time when a seemingly small cultural detail made a big impact on a deal, a hire, or a business decision.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I would say my favorite experiences career-wise have always involved international clients or partners or agency vendors or customers, because and you may know this, I'm a third culture kid. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I'm Indian by origin. My parents immigrated to the United States in their late teens or like 20s from India and set down roots in the US. And then my dad got a job offer for Saudi Aramco 4 years before I was born. And so I was born in Saudi Arabia, and I lived there until I was 15 on an international expatriate compound, and then moved back to Texas and went to high school there. And then I moved to Massachusetts for college, and then I never really left. So I am more comfortable in international airports than probably any other place. I don't really have a home. My home is moving around and traveling and seeing new places and being around people who appreciate that as well. So I think that the greatest business decisions that I've made, as well as hires, have been informed by self-awareness of what you want and don't want, and what you're good at and what you're not good at. And that humility in being able to say, I don't understand everything. I don't have the answer here. The search for the solution may be joyous in itself, but I do not have it right now. That's another sort of thing that defines really strong leaders. And some of the best leaders I've worked for have been leaders who don't have the answer and don't claim or pretend to have the answer right away. They do the research, and they ask people, and they ask their direct reports, and they ask their customers, and they seek to learn and to educate themselves to become experts. And so they can do things that are probably the right things to deliver against an intended outcome. They have that humility, that servant leadership, that self-awareness that allows them to receive information and change their decisions based on the information they receive, as opposed to being sort of dogmatically focused on something at the expense of their better judgment or the judgment of the people around them. So I would say being a third culture kid, having that cultural sensitivity and understanding that there's more than one definition of ideal is really important. And I'll give you an example of that. As I was having a conversation with a friend, and he was saying, well, look, I mean, I wouldn't ever want to live anywhere other than, XYZ place. And I'm like, well, why? And he was like, well, because the plumbing and the electricity and the infrastructure. I'm like, yeah, I get it. Fantastic and important components of quality of life for certain, right? But is that the only thing? Could it be that there are plenty of people who are happy in places that do not have that, as long as they have access to other things, right? I've lived all over the world, and there are some places that I've loved living in, some places that I loved less, but the infrastructure really wasn't the primary motivator of that, right? There's lots of ways on balance to have a good outcome, and it's around not being too set in your ways. So I would say that makes for the best business decisions, because you're not necessarily focused on only one answer being the correct answer, but you're willing to understand that, again, from a perspective of empathy, it really depends on who your audience is. They'll have their own definition of desirable, right, ideal. And it's your responsibility to make what you deliver fit within their worldview.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Vinda, because it kind of, you're talking about that whole international experience gives you your own personal diversity of thought, right? Because you're exposed to so much more. One of the things that I enjoy doing with the family, with the kids in the family, is making sure that they all travel internationally, because I look at some other, friends and colleagues that have always been in one geography their entire life. So as much as you want to have diversity of thought, you're not going to have it because you've been in the same element every single day. So it definitely gives you a different flavor on how to approach life and how to approach problems and issues that come up in the workforce.
Absolutely. And I also think it eliminates fear, or it mitigates fear in a lot of ways. We tend to be afraid of things we don't know or don't understand. So as soon as we see something, I mean, it's just human nature, right? When we see something that feels different to us or something we're not prepared for, our initial reaction is to either fight it or flee. But the reality is, as soon as you start to learn more about it, it may seem a lot more manageable and actually very surmountable. So it's around gathering that perspective and that context to be able to make an informed decision and to approach a problem in a thoughtful way that is not driven by fear or uncertainty or panic or anything of that sort, but is just approached with a sense of calmness, purpose, and self-awareness.
Great. Well, Vinda, thank you so much. Okay, now I'm going to throw you a little bit of a loop here. We're going to have some fun with some fun rapid fire questions. So I'm
Sure, love it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start. What's the weirdest email subject line you've ever received or sent?
Oh boy, I've sent a lot of weird ones, Anna. That's a loaded question.
All right.
The one last year before Engage, I sent out an email to prospects that said, "Let's get engaged," which I thought was funny, and I had a big chuckle about that.
That's a good one. I love that. Okay. If your sales pitch had a theme song, what would it be?
"Never Let Me Down Again" by Depeche Mode,
Oh,
because
great one.
That would be my theme song for pretty much anything I could possibly imagine. It's my favorite song. And every time I would walk out on stage, I would always have that song play as my sting.
That's great. That's a great one. Okay, if you had to give yourself a completely ridiculous job title based on what you actually do all day, what would it be?
Probably assistant storyteller. Storyteller, because all I do is tell stories to various different audiences, whether it's tech audiences or staffing audiences or my kids or in my band or whatever it may be. An assistant, because I don't think I feel like a chief anything. I feel like an assistant. So assistant storyteller.
That's a good one too. Okay, if you had to describe your career as a type of food, what would it be and why?
A reduced fat brownie.
Okay, you got to explain why.
Okay. So back when we thought that like cutting fat was the secret to health, there was this influx of products that were reduced fat. And the irony being that we actually need a lot of fat for our brains to function properly. So reduced fat doesn't help anything. But what's interesting about it is it's calorically dense. It's mostly satisfying. It's appealing to outsiders. The taste is addictive. And so is the complexity of texture, but it won't suffice as a standalone meal. And it's not quite as rich as a full fat brownie. And the more that I eat, the hungrier I get. So I actually will need to keep eating them again and again.
Okay, so I have a feeling you've answered this question before because that was brilliant.
I have never answered a question like that. You're the only person who asked me anything about that. But I was, as I was just like thinking, I was like, for some reason, like it was like the early 90s or whatever, like reduced fat brownies were everywhere. I was like, I used to love them. And I was like, boy, that wasn't a healthy choice, but I get it. I get it now. And it's satisfying in its own way.
No, that's great. Okay, so last one. If you have to close a deal, but the only way you can communicate is through emojis, what's your message?
I would probably do the praying hands emoji, followed by the shaking hands emoji, followed by the flying money emoji, and then end it with the heart emoji.
Oh, nice one. Nice one. That's a good one. It's a good way to close the deal. I like the praying hand, like, please, let's get this done.
Yes, please. Sign this contract, please. It's been months. I'm begging you, please.
Exactly. Well, Linda, listen, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Can't wait to have you again. It's always a great conversation.
Anna, it's been a real pleasure and privilege. I'm such a fan of everything that you do, and I can't wait to keep following how you thrive and succeed with AFN Strategic Partners. And so thank you for having me on the pod. And yeah, if anybody wants to connect after this, feel free to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn or vinda@refassured.com. And yeah, I hope to hear from some of you.
Thank you for listening to the Pass the Pitch podcast with Anna Frazzetto. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Next up, Marcy Stout on curiosity, growth mindset, and not believing the negative stories you tell yourself. See you then.